Good morning, everyone. Now it's time for the eagerly awaited masterclass on film. I'd like to introduce our session moderator. He's the writer and producer of the acclaimed Tumbad. He's a member of the SWA Executive Committee and the convener of ISE 7. Please welcome Mitesh Shah.
Hi everyone. I know everyone's been waiting for this one, so I'll not waste any time on this and I'll invite very acclaimed, very warm, very generous Kiran Rao, producer, writer, and filmmaker. Please come and grace the stage.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Hi.
Hi Kiran. Thank you so much for being here. And congratulations on Lapata Ladies. Wonderful, wonderful film.
Mitesh and I actually go back many, many years. Mitesh was also part of the Ship of Theseus team. And so we worked together when I helped Ship of Theseus reach cinemas in India.
Yes, you
and
did.
then he went on to write the wonderful Tumbad. So lovely to be in conversation with you.
Thank you so much. And like I said, generous, I did mean it. The way she helped the film, the way she came aboard Ship of Theseus and what she did with the film to make it reach the cinemas, to distribute it and lend her name to it. Thank you so much for that. So in this masterclass today, we'll deconstruct her process of coming on a film, writing a film and making it reach the screen. We'll first begin with Lapata Ladies, your most recent work and wonderful again. What has the journey of Lapata Ladies been? Like Anjum Bhai told me about a little bit of the journey from where it started from Sinistan and how Biplab came in, you liked the script and then other writers collaborated. What was that journey like? Can you please take us through it?
Actually, Lapata Ladies in some way really shows the magic of how people come together to make movies in the process in which it was made. So many things led up to the moment of us getting that script. Biplab must have written it, had his ideas. In fact, he tells some stories that I'll tell you about how he thought of writing the film. Applied to Sinistan, which was a fantastic initiative of Screenwriters Association and Sinistan to kind of choose great scripts and put them out into the world for filmmakers and directors to make. And Christo is here, whose film won the first prize. There he is. Yeah. His Ullarukku is now available, of course, for us to see. And Christo had written that script and also submitted it and won the first prize that year. And the second prize was won by a film called Two Brides. And it just so happened that Amir Khan was on the jury of that Sinistan competition. And he came home and he said, look, I've got a superb idea. I'd love for you to hear it or read it. And he told me the story in one line. And the story was about two young brides going, in a veil. And this man takes his, very young bride through many modes of transport and reaches his house. And when they unveil her, it's the wrong woman. And I was just like, what? Because, I didn't have the build-up of seeing all the many brides. And I was like, and then? So then he was like, yeah, that's the film. And I remember thinking, it's incredible. I mean, just the one line had the promise of adventure, had so many things that these girls could be experiencing along the way. And I was really keen to read it. And once, of course, the competition was over and Biplab won the second prize, Amir asked him if he could share the script with me, and I read the film and I absolutely loved it. I remember thinking, because I had been writing at this point for many, many years, my own stories, and I'd been really struggling with the idea of reaching the end moment on any of them. They all had very strong sort of characters, interesting plots. They all really dug into issues and ideas that I feel very strongly about, and continue to kind of want to explore. But somehow that finality of like reaching a good draft just escaped me. And so at this point, I want to acknowledge how hard it is for writers to do what they do. All of us struggle, I'm sure, every single day to put out a good page, to reach that point at which you say the end and you're absolutely satisfied. It's a slow process, and I think every writer has their good days and bad days and their challenges. But I was fortunate enough to be given this sort of jewel of an idea, and for me, actually, what I realize is, again, like I started saying, it's so many things coming together. That idea in itself was wonderful. That script, I felt, could become even better. There was a world in which that script actually could flower into something even more kind of inclusive, more fun, more speaking to many more struggles that I wanted to include in it. So we spoke to Biplab and we asked whether we could acquire the film, acquire the script and have it worked on by other writers. After about a year or so of, I think, him wanting to make the film himself, he agreed to let us have it, which was really generous. And that's when, the search began for the right writer. What I realized as a writer myself is that it takes these different energies for sometimes the written word to kind of find its place. I think it comes a little bit from the fact that we all, have heard stories. And often in telling a story to someone else, time and time again, when you tell the story, you kind of can hear when people are laughing, when a certain, when a certain idea is really working. And also in the telling of the story, new ideas come to you. It's something about how the brain works and, how the synapses connect things at different points. And in the telling of it on the day, a new idea is born. And that comes from sharing, and that's the magic, I think, of filmmaking and screenwriting in particular. It's a solitary job a lot of the time, but it can really be a rich collaborative process. So that's what happened on this film. We had an incredible writer called Sneha Desai, whom we got on the film. And it happened to be 2020 and the lockdown, and we sent Sneha the script, but I felt it was really important. I was really delighted to be working with a woman to begin with. She had written Maharaj, the screenplay of Maharaj before, but it was of course based on a play, and this would be her first sort of screenplay. I kind of knew that she had the sensitivity for this kind of film. And what we did actually initially was just discuss all the things that we wanted to put into it. And in broad terms, I think what Two Brides was a much more, it was funny, but it was a little more in the vein of a realistic art house film. And a lot of the characters I felt could have much stronger arcs. There was the wonderful Pool is exactly the way she was in the film. But Jaya was a character that in the original did not have as much mystery. I really felt like, because the family kind of gets to know that she wants to study very early on in the story, in Biplab's version. And both Sneha and I felt that it ends there. Then it's just about getting Pool home. So Jaya's character doesn't have an arc very much if that happens. So we discussed how we wanted to deepen sort of Jaya's journey, create this sense of mystery, create the struggles, so that it's, the fact that she actually had to do all of this to study as a struggle becomes a, sort of a climactic moment. You work towards the fact that you reveal it. And the policeman and Manjumai were all characters that weren't there in the original. They were the whole station family.
Ravi Kishan character was not there in the film, the original film.
No. There was a marginal, I think, a police station scene but not very much to do. There was not much of a role for a policeman there. And the idea that I really felt like this story, because it has so many elements of sort of social commentary, it was important to do it in a lighter, more funny, inclusive vein, because a lot of what women go through, we all know. We are so aware of, the struggles of our mothers, grandmothers, the women that we work with at home. But how do we address some of those things in a way that's enjoyable, and there's a newer perspective. There's some solutions, there's some new ideas that we can offer. So Sneha and I went over all of this. There was many drafts that we wrote. Sneha would write a few scenes, send them to me, and I would respond. We would talk about them on Zoom, and I would give her my notes. And we had a rather lengthy, fantastic version of the script by the time we narrated to Amir in Jan 2021. It was, Sneha had also done the hard work of finding a writer, someone she knew from her theatre days who was from UP. So she got someone to actually help her with the language. And she had already written a lot of that delicious dialect into the screenplay. So we did narrate the script to Amir. Everybody enjoyed it. I still felt like there was a certain, there were some things that I felt we could change. And one of the major things was the policeman. Sneha's version of the policeman was a lot more of a detective. He was a straight-up guy who was very interested to get to the bottom of things, and he had this sort of funny sidekick, Dubey. So what I did at that point also was that I wanted to bring an evenness to the language and the humor, and so we looked at bringing a third writer on, Divyanidhi Sharma, who I think Amir had worked on for Sitare Zameen Par. He's a writer of Sitare Zameen Par. And I basically sent Divi the script, Sneha's version, and how Divi as a writer approaches it. And this is interesting because each of these was taking something that was great to begin with. Two Brides was great, but Sneha brought something completely unique to it. And then Divi took that script on and he started writing it from the beginning. He rewrote it almost.
The screenplay as well?
Yeah, with the same scenes, but it was his version of the scene, with his own dialogue. And in the process, and I had told him that, look, Divi, I really want to work on the cop. Can we do something interesting with the cop? And interestingly, Divyanidhi has lived in many, many of small towns and villages like our Patila, because his father was in the UP police. So it just so happened that he had a sort of an insider's experience of policeman. So he rewrote that character, and he added many sort of beautiful scenes that we sort of pulled out and put into the script. He writes songs as he's writing the script. So literally, the Dautwa was a result of him writing it into the script when he was writing. So actually it's wonderful to hear him narrate, because he starts singing a song suddenly and he'll sing the whole song for you in the middle of narrating, So for instance, the I Love You scene, Divi had written it in the beginning when they both get on the boat and they're leaving in the boat, and she's kind of feeling quite sad, and he's getting sort of this alone time with her after being, in this big marriage hall. And he says, English bol ke bataye. And that scene was beautiful, and I knew I wanted it in the film, but I didn't know where. So in some way, I was very, very fortunate to work with other writers, but I also worked like a writer in order to be able to see what I wanted to achieve from the film. And I think every director in that sense, even if they do not write, are writerly in that process of editing down moments, imagining things that are on the page to screen, and also finding a sur through the film. Because each of us, when we read a book, we imagine or visualize the world of that book differently. And that's the same when you read a script, actually. And I think in the hands of another director, this film could have been very, very different. So I think each director brings something to that, which is also responding to it a bit like a writer.
So I mean, so that's your lens. I mean, the way you look at it. So like when ideas come to you, like both your films have made a social comment, and are those the kind of ideas that you look for when you look at an idea? As in, oh, this is the film I want to make, this is the film I want to get in. Or what is that deciding factor? And at what point do you come in?
I think it's a great privilege to be able to make films.
It is.
It's a massive enterprise. There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of money involved. And honestly, while it's deeply artistic at its core, it's a need for expression. There's so many kinds of art forms that are woven into the making of a film. I really do take that privilege very seriously. And I feel I'd like to make something that speaks to the issues we face. I mean, and I think most artists do. We all respond to our times. We respond to our challenges, personal or collective. And I think that's what I really enjoy about this filmmaking process, and the ability to be able to speak to so many people and include them in this conversation in a film. And so I think I just naturally gravitate towards films that do more than entertain. I don't know why that word entertain has come to connote something very vacuous. And, you kind of tend to feel like entertainment is nothing. But I mean, what was all our, from when we told stories on the walls of caves or sitting around a fire to now sitting in a darkened room watching flickering images on a screen, it's all to kind of, I think, finally, kind of look into our frailties, all the things that make us human, and storytelling can do that in a way, especially films can do that in a way that perhaps sitting around a fire cannot. It can take you to worlds of imagination that you wouldn't be able to, perhaps. So to be able to use that magic of storytelling and still kind of address things that we collectively go through as human beings is a superpower. It's an amazing privilege, and I really do believe that we can do it even when we are doing the most so-called entertaining film, which is super blockbuster. Yes. And it starts with just seeding in more responsible ways of talking about anything, whether they're characters, whether and I'm talking about actual the semiotics of the image. When you think about what images mean, I think as directors and writers we have to really think about that when we write something and not make it just convenient for for someone to consume, and make it fun. And I remember asking a director, a very, very big film director, about this at one point, and I don't want to mention names, and I was like, don't you think that this character went from being a really strong woman to being, just the romantic co-lead in the film? Why did that? And that scene, by lots of people thought it was highly romantic, but it was literally stripping her of her agency. I mean, why did you do that? And it was not a pleasant question, I'm sure, for any filmmaker to be asked, but he honestly and fairly, easily said that because of the drama in it. It's so dramatic. Whatever I do is for drama, is for, for the dramatic effect. Almost to say that doesn't matter, actually. If it's good drama, it'll fly. And that's actually, I think, what makes all of us, at least me, very conscious of what I'm making. And I suppose that's what people say about, like, it's not so much that I gravitate towards, usually stories that are connected in some way with how I'm feeling about something, some issue at that point. or issues that I've faced over time, but all of them will have something human, something, and dealt with hopefully responsibly. I think that's enough for all of us to make social commentary. If we're just a little bit more conscious of, say, how we portray people, certain relationships, being a little bit more sensitive to more, kind of less only about achieving a clap or a laugh.
So to make that make my question a little more specific, and this came from Anjum Pai, and he wanted me to ask you this on stage. Like, if you were to receive two scripts, and both well written, both sensibly written, in terms of drama, in terms of structure and all, and one had written blockbuster all over it. No one knows what a blockbuster really is, but like a proper studio film. And the other, that's a critique of the socio-political issue, that you tend to talk about, or you gravitate towards. Both well written. What are you likely to choose then?
If they're both well written and they both have, as stories are interesting to me, and I can find myself or my voice somewhere in those stories, I look for that. Automatically, I think we, as directors or people who want to make films, we try to look for subjects that suit us as people, as storytellers. And if both were equal in that department, I would definitely go with blockbuster.
The blockbuster.
Yeah. The reason being that I studied, I couldn't afford the 4 years of FTII. I needed to get a job soon, so I went and did my master's in mass communication. And I think Jamia, when it was set up with the idea of, similarly kind of trying to equip people in a world of mass media to be responsible to what images do, how they function, how they work with people, how do, stories work. And I think at that, my impulse was always that when I wanted to make films, which is that I wanted to be able to reach a larger audience with what I was doing, in some way to be able to contribute with my voice, with my art, to a discourse that was broader. So a blockbuster just helps you reach more people. I mean, I would any day go with blockbuster.
And also probably the success gives you some more elbow room to make again what you want to make.
Yeah.
So, but would that blockbuster again have your lens on it? Would you?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I don't think it would be possible for me to do it otherwise. This film was Lapata Ladies was a bit of an experiment in that sense. I really wanted to take what was a fairly intimate, small village story and try to do it in a way that anybody, anywhere could watch it, and would be interested in it. So it was my attempt at a blockbuster. Sadly, didn't become as big a money-wise blockbuster, but I think it reached a fairly wide audience and it got so much love from people that I feel like I did do what I set out to do, which is make a film that was... blockbuster, we tend again, like entertainment, to think of it as something usually really daft. It's like, or leave your, thinking mind at home kind of thing. But yeah, Lapata Ladies was my blockbuster.
And so Kiran, as a writer, as in what is your actual writing process like? Is it properly structured? Is it extremely intuitive? You jump onto the page and start writing and see where it goes? You have a certain direction where you're heading, or you pick up a character and then let the character follow what the character wants to do? What is your writing process like, and how has it changed from Dhobi Ghat to now?
With Dhobi Ghat, actually, when I first started writing Dhobi Ghat, I was really testing my abilities as a writer, because I had never written anything before, and Jamia didn't have a writing program. So, like many writers, I'm sure, I didn't study the classic sort of Sid Field kind of writing breakdown structure. I sort of intuitively had an idea. The story, the idea was to explore the city through these 4 very different people who live in it, and how the lives of these sort of intersecting lives would give us a sort of more deep and more felt image of the city, experience of the city. So it was sort of non-linear in my mind. I knew that I wanted these 4 very disparate characters, but as is the case in the city, how these lives from very different backgrounds tend to, sort of intersect and, kind of affect each other as a result. And was very much my experience in the city of Bombay. And really, for me, the idea was to write a film about a city. And so when I was writing that film, I kind of knew what these characters were, and I let the writing lead me to the end. And interestingly enough, that first draft, really not very many things changed from it at all when I went to make the film. But it was also a very personal film. It was a smaller film. It was okay to write in that way where I still realized that when I was writing, I think all of us, even if you're telling a joke, you tend to know that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You want to be working towards a point when everyone's waiting for what's going to happen, and then you sort of have this climax and this end. So I guess all of us intuitively, even if we don't know how to write, we write like that. So I wrote it very, very instinctively. The idea was to draw from my own experiences, my own observations of the city, and that script was written like that. The characters remained very much what they were when I started in my very first draft. They were on screen. That was actually, for me, really a test for me to see whether it was possible to take these just what were amorphous kind of ideas, very visual ideas of the city. There's not much dialogue in the film and in the screenplay, and kind of build it also then a little bit on the edit. What happens is, because one of the characters is not in the same time line, she kind of comes and goes at different points, and actually those in terms of writing, those intersections were something that you could find on the editing table, and that's actually what happened with Dhobi Ghat. A lot of it was written on the editing table. For instance, there was this one character called Selva who was a construction worker at the top of a building, and he was punctuating different kind of acts in the film, and you kind of saw his journey as well. But sadly, that didn't work on the edit table. So in the screenplay, it was there, but it was there almost as just visuals because he has no dialogue. But it became the opening credits of the film. It didn't work so a lot of that film got written on the edit table in a sense, or at least constructed. And then, of course, there was this Lapata Ladies experience. But in between, when I was writing, I have written 2 or 3 scripts that I now am making and will be doing next. And the way I, again, write them is often I start with an idea that, or an experience of my own, or something that I'm struggling with, or something I'm interested in, and try to look at it a little bit through this world. So I build actually the idea in the world, and the characters kind of get magnetically attracted to it. So if I'm dealing with, there's one story which is about a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, and there's it's about a girl who's, her journey towards pregnancy, and it was a lot to do with what I was going through with fertility treatment. And the characters in that just appeared and knocked on my door. And I feel like a lot of writers know what I'm talking about. It happens to you. Characters come to you and demand to be in the story in some way, and you include them, as you're going along. And sometimes in different iterations, you might want to take them out, but they suit that film, and they are born of that idea quite organically. And that's how I usually write it. I rarely start with a character. It's usually with an idea of something, and characters come to it. So I have a couple of stories like that, and often when I think of the idea, at least one central character just is part of it organically. So I tend to write in a kind of in a flow, and I don't put down, I kind of broadly in my head already know acts, but I quite often do not know what the end is. And I work towards the end while I'm writing. I think that gives it a sense of organic build-up towards the end. But a lot of people say that that's actually really not a great way to do it. And I realize that that has its pitfalls, because quite often, how if you have an end in mind, you can find different roads to it. But often, which is why I've taken so long to write, is I get waylaid and I get I segue off into something else and can never reach the end, and I'm dissatisfied with what I've found. So that also happens. And I've had more failures, I think, as a writer than successes. And what I realize now is I actually work best with when I bring my idea to a writer and I'm able to work with another writer to kind of almost like that person anchors me, and I'm able to, kind of go a bit crazy and stay within So I kind of stay within a world if I have someone that I'm narrating to. So I'm right. This current film that I'm making next is something that I've got another writer on, and it's a story that I've been writing for a couple of years, and with her on board, I find I'm able to, reach certain. I guess, of course, the end, I know what the end is, but I can arrive at it with her almost like a compass.
But without knowing the end, as in I can never jump into writing if I do not know the general direction where I'm headed. If I do not know, so the end might keep changing. I might keep course correcting, as you reach it. But I know that this is where I'm going. Otherwise, if I drift, I would. It'll take me a much longer time to write it. But that is your process, and you are happy to give it that time for the film to.
Yeah, develop. I think I know roughly where I'm going. I mean, and there's a natural end to any story, honestly. Right. In fact, one of this mini-series thing that I'm writing, there are 3 possible endings, and the struggle is when you write it to that point do you actually know what feels the most correct. That's what I mean. I mean, I kind of know where it's going to go, but it's nice to be able to work it to a point where it organically feels like the end. You often, for instance, one story I've written, I know exactly what the end is, but the getting there and how it'll affect how the end plays out is what is the journey, I think, of any writer. That's the fun, exactly.
So how different were the challenges in the 2 films, because they are like years apart, and the way Dhobi Ghat was made or written and the way Lapata was made, in terms of how things have changed, how the industry has changed, how cinema watching has changed. So how different that has been, how difficult that has been, or it is just different and evolved.
No, the world actually changed between Dhobi Ghat and Lapata Ladies. We have a whole other world. Actually, I would say in the last 5 years, we have a whole other world as well. But I started writing Dhobi Ghat 20 years ago, in 2005. And it was a world in which an art house film was, something you could quite easily imagine doing, cobble together a little bit of money and make a film. And dream of a theatrical release, which I got. So I think those would be daydreams potentially now. But the world, I think in terms of storytelling, what's interesting is how the world of film has, in many ways, I hate to say this, but obviously grown because, of course, of the serialized kind of way of storytelling that has now become so much more popular, so has, given people a chance to explore stories of so many different kinds and distribution of so many different kinds. But I think we are also hugely challenged by the world of gaming and how immersive some of these other kinds of storytelling are. And as filmmakers, it's staggering to think that the gaming industry, just one of those games will do more than collectively all the film industries of the world.
Yes.
Box office. Just one game can be bigger. And so there's a lot to learn in that sense from the new forms of sort of visual media. And I think that's the reason why there are many reasons we attribute to why people do not want to go to cinemas as easily anymore. Maybe, of course, just this advent of sort of the individual availability of technology so easily at your fingertips, anything that you want, has in many ways changed this sort of collective experience. And it's a tragedy to my mind. But it's also pushing us as filmmakers to really consider whether, what we are making will make people want to come together and experience it in a cinema. It's become even more of a privilege now to do it. Because I know for myself, when there was no other option but to see the film on a screen, I would rush to the screen to see it. And today we all obviously are thinking of, oh my God, take a cab, go past Bandra's wonderful roads, get to BKC or Juhu, and the expense of it, like pay 250 rupees for a ticket and then pay 450 rupees for popcorn. And you're just like, is this
time and effort?
Commitment of time, effort, money is sometimes outweighs the convenience of waiting for it at home. And so we as writers and filmmakers are now going to be forced to think, so you have to stop being so complacent. Your audience is not just waiting around for you anymore. They'll find it, I was shocked to know that there was some game in which a singer like Lady Gaga was performing live on the game. Because if gamers are not coming to your concert, you're going to the gamer. That's the kind of, also that industry has been around as long as films. Yes. And the kind of incredible depth of that world, from manga to anime to gaming, and how gaming has kind of gone into it. And again, it's so much more because you're playing as it's immersive in a whole other way, because it's customized for you. You are going through it. So what's the word for it? Where you are, you are experiencing it. Yes. You're not watching your hero on screen experiencing it.
You are the hero.
You are the hero. So these are things as writers we need to kind of learn from, and understand what is the relevance of cinema anymore? What is the relevance of films at all? Why do we make films? And of course we all love films and we want them to, the film world to continue, but in order for it to do that, in this new world, we'll need to kind of adapt our own skills as writers and filmmakers. Yeah, it's a new world, I feel, for us filmmakers. I don't think we are accepting it. We are constantly talking about going back to pre-COVID levels of attendance in cinemas. We don't have enough screens. We don't have enough, which is all a fact. We don't have enough screens. We need to make films much more affordable. And we see in some industries where there is a better standard of living and the films are, in a sense, the theatrical experience is affordable. That is, you'll see that the footfalls have not gone down. But worldwide, it's contracted. The film business, you're just not doing as well anymore. And so it just forces us and begs the question, are we relevant, and what should we be doing in order to be able to speak to what people want? Because at the end of the day, we want to do what we want to do, and that's the artistic part of it. Yes. But how do we actually adapt to a world where there is lower attention span, but at the same time, I have a son who will be like on a game for 3 hours and not realize that 3 hours have gone by or whatever. Usually not allowed for 3 hours, but you know what I mean? There's that kind of immersion. Right. What do we do?
So like you said, the effort and the commitment of time that one needs to go to the cinema to counter that, with the advent of OTT platforms, not just as a consumer but also as a filmmaker, there are increased creative choices, for writers and filmmakers both, and that was the promise that they came with. Yeah. That's something that you cannot do in a film. Like, it has to be plot driven, or it has to be like one person driven, which has changed. The serialized writing, serialized way of making has changed. So is that promise still good? Has it did it hold, or we are doing the same thing what we did in cinemas on OTT now?
Oh, this is a landmine of a question. Because honestly, I mean, I have to say I'm not a huge watcher of series, so I'm not best equipped to answer this. But there was that promise, and I think there are the way that series engage you is, you know, is something that has been there for a long time. I mean, and we've seen it on television, and I suppose that kind of wanting to go home and watch something habit is there. But I don't know if the promise of giving us actually no. There is the promise that, you know, you could do on OTT what you cannot say on a screen, largely still holds. I think there's a lot more, of course there's a lot of self-censorship, there's a lot of things that we feel that we cannot do for audiences that comes into play now, but perhaps wasn't there when this, you know, the big boom of American TV writing started off. It was being able to tell stories in a way that you just cannot in film, with like characters opening up. Of course, because you were doing it over a period of time, building a world in greater detail, you know, kind of speaking to many different issues was possible. I think that continues to be the case for quite a large number of these industries. I don't know so much in India because I think again here there is I suppose a need to also get more of an audience to kind of migrate to OTT, and that kind of very successfully happened during COVID. But now, you know, more and more you see the kind of things that are so-called working or, you know, big on OTT in India are usually things that they're not vastly different from, say, what we would see in a film. So that, say, the promise that, oh, you know, you can build worlds and do other things, maybe not. And that's also because I think a bit of a bubble burst when it came to OTT. I mean, it was like the whole, you know, it suddenly was this golden egg that everyone could do anything that they dreamt of. And I suppose that had to come full circle at some point. So, yeah, I think there is a lot of promise there. There are stories to be told. I just don't know how many people are commissioning them and what the actual economics allows one to do. So, like everything, I think there was a golden age, and I'm not sure where from here. I think we still have some great writing on OTT in India. People are doing really compelling shows, but I think there's lots to be done, and that's the fun thing. There are lots and lots more people, I think, now that you can reach through OTT.
And you're doing something already, right? Are you also doing something for OTT right now?
I mean, we haven't yet. Nothing has been greenlit. I have a few series ideas. A couple of series and one mini series, but yeah, I don't actually know where to go with what I'm doing. I keep feeling like I want to, you know, try and take my ideas that I wrote even for series and make them into films. Right. It's one to do with the process of it. I feel like I'll probably have more control over cinema. And somehow the series, even as writers, there's a lot more heads in a room, which is great, honestly. I love the idea of writers' rooms. I think even films should have them to some extent. It's just because, you know, you can hear a false note when someone's, you know, when you're in a room much faster. And bad ideas get weeded out a lot faster than you lingering and trying to take it, struggling with it for a long period of time and then, you know, abandoning it. So yeah, but I still feel like, as a film, I feel like, I don't know, it's I suppose something to do with a connection to an audience that I can see. And I suppose, I hate to say it, but you know, when you see that a film's box office is such and such, you know that so many people have watched it. You have a sense of actual numbers, whereas I feel like OTT, it kind of goes into an ether that you're not. As filmmakers, we don't have that much transparency about how many people actually watch. Did they actually like it? You know, how do you actually... I was talking to Christo one day and he was telling me about how in Kerala they have a lot of film kind of clubs or groups and a lot of conversation around films. So, you know, you watch a film and there's a lot of online... Still, you know, that kind of blogging sort of world where you write about the film, other people's a bit letterboxed sort of world where I feel like that sharing is what I really like about making films.
I'd asked Kiran to, send me some images of her process of translating things from script to screen, and she sent me something from Lapata Ladies.
Okay, guys,
Sanjit, if you can put it on the screen, please.
It's very bad screenshots of my script on set. Okay, yeah.
So would you like to take us through this process of what was,
I thought I'd
on
send
the
you.
page?
Yeah, I thought I'd send you a. Can you even see everyone? Yeah. No. So I sent him a couple of the first few scenes of like where they get switched on a train. It's
You want them to
useful
scroll
kind
to
of.
that one?
Yeah. No. So it starts here where they get on the train. So. The pool has moved towards the middle of the seat. So you kind of see a little bit about how it was written on the page. And for us, this was the interior of the train. Usually this is my shooting script. I have it in a small, literally this size or smaller version of it. And I do my sort of short angles and breakdowns next to the scene wherever possible. I've sent a whole bunch of them, and when we block the scene, when we're rehearsing it, and then when we block it on set, some of the details are added and changed. So this scene was kind of one of the trickier scenes where Pool gets interchanged with Jaya. This is where he goes to the toilet and then, the train pulls into a station. If you turn the page, there's... What happened...
Can you scroll? Can you go to the next page, Sanjit?
The next one should be... Yeah. So what happened was that Sneha had written in a very funny scene where there's a guy who is sitting at the window. These guys, of course, on the two benches. And the chap who's at the window, inside we have a lot of sort of people passing by and a person who comes to sell pani. And at the window, there was a guy who was saying, santra, santra, do santra. And then this guy comes and he's like, the wife tells him santra lo. And he says, Arey, nahi, like, watermelon. What do you call watermelon? Kalingad, whatever, tarbooj. So he's like, nahi sir, ye tarbooj le lo. And the train is now about to leave. And so he buys the tarbooj and he gives him the money and the train starts moving and he realizes that his tarbooj is stuck outside the window and he can't bring it in. And all of this was kind of happening while at the back, one other bride and her husband leave. And Pool, finding that there is space and she's got all this going on, she slides towards the window. And Pradeep sits on this side and tells Jaya to come and sit next to him. So Jaya is technically sitting exactly where Pool was. And Pool is sitting where that earlier bride was, who is just left. So as far as Deepak is concerned, that earlier bride is still sitting there and the one in the middle is Pool. So this was sort of the way, so WM is the watermelon man. And then there's watermelon man's wife, which is WMW. Santra Lona, and then go back, sorry. And then when the train jolts to a start and his hand is outside, then she says, Kahe the Santra Lo. So it was a really cute joke, but we didn't find a way to the film. Now you can turn over. And so this is also how they get off the train and the exit, because, it also something that we didn't want to dwell on too much. And I have to say at this point that when you see it written, and it's very easy to write these things, but the process from page to screen is that much harder. So as writers, please keep it in mind for us directors, because what happened was, it was it had to be late enough and dark enough and everybody is tired enough that Deepak just reaches over, shakes her, picks up his bags and leaves. And Jaya, also who's asleep, gets up and follows him off the train, but realizes at some point, and what is that point? That's something, again, that we achieved on set, that she's following the wrong guy. Remember that she's also not seen this husband of hers till a few days or the previous day. She only really knows his brown suit. So it was critical that both the men were the same sort of build, were wearing similar colored suits. It's night, she's wearing a veil. And it's believable that she could follow this guy to a certain point. But there is a point at which she realizes that I'm following the wrong guy. So what was that point? And that's what we actually had to arrive at on set. Because how to make it seamless. So the audience knows, she knows, but Deepak doesn't know. So it's the point at which Deepak gets off the train and says, Jaldi chalo, aakhri bus hai, nikal jayega. So she just follows him. I think I didn't give you the next page, did I? Okay, anyway. No, this is not the next page. This is something else. Okay, but I should have given you, that's the critical thing though. I forgot, it's in my, I could have sent it, sorry. But that's where it's not as clear in the script, but it's written in the script, but she basically gets off, she hears his voice and hesitates. The train begins to move, and then she makes a conscious decision to follow him. All of this, if you can see, it's in like literally a few paragraphs, and it's very, pool slides over, this happens, that happens. But in the breaking down of that scene, it was, it took me many, we storyboarded everything, and we shot it as per storyboard. But I think I only managed to find the rhythm and the actual efficacy of the storytelling on the edit table, where Jabin and I actually had to do it time and time again, where it was clear but not so clear, because in the screenplay it was very, very clear that one person moves and she moves here. And I wanted it to be kind of how it is in a train, there's movement, it's a lot more natural, and things are happening. So this was the way we kind of had to break it down to make it, and ultimately lose that watermelon thing altogether, because Sneha had almost done it as a decoy that was happening on the side. Like, something's happening, everybody is distracted by this. But we felt that if everybody is listening to this watermelon guy, it adds length. If you don't, that's one part of it. But the second is, we did want people to know that she had moved. But do it in a way that it's sort of,
It had the risk of being looking very, very convenient. But actually, when I saw it, I thought, how are they going to do this? Because I knew from the trailer, I knew from, knowing where the story is going, that they are going to be exchanged.
Yeah.
But it had the chance of looking very, very convenient, which it didn't. So, it was quite complex, but handled in a way that it didn't look convenient or convoluted. ये तो सोचा है इसलिए कर रहे हैं. But it looked like, it's very natural and organic.
And that, I think, really hats off not just to my DP who helped me shoot it in a way where, it felt very natural, things were moving. We were shooting on real trains, on real live railway tracks. So we didn't really have that much luxury of just doing many, many takes, because the train also had to start at a certain point exactly. So, messages going to the engine to move, because we wanted to see the platform. So, and how fairly small budget films are. So you can't, we didn't have a lot of, it was very important to have that on storyboard, but it also then only was found on the edit table. So again, here was just like something that was added, previous. When, go back, Jaya comes home, we kind of, I kind of added, this was also, I think, partly there in the script, but then, how things just dialogue gets written in. Sometimes it happens while you're working with actors. Most of this, of course, is also what Sneha has written. But yeah, go next. I don't know. This was when Jaya comes home and the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law are fighting. And then, what is this? uh, Patila railway station. Yeah, I think it's just to be able to show, for instance, in this scene 27, you know, you like as a director, you just add beats to a screen. A lot of it is, you know, so what I feel about the written word to screen also is it is a process of everything is a process of interpretation, and things change, get lost or added along the way. It happens from story idea to your writing itself, from your first draft to your second draft. Then it goes to a director who imagines it in their own way. And then while I'm imagining it, I add bits to the script. I look at various ways in which I'm going to tell the story, and how you actually visually tell the story changes the story, of course. Right. You know, and any other director would do it differently, and they you know, how they would highlight a certain emotion or, you know, capture a certain mood or location, the choice of locations, the choice of actors. This is writing as well, if you know what I mean. You're writing with people, you're writing with light, you're writing with, you know. So, yeah, so I feel like that, and then after that you reach an edit stage, and that's actually where you do the most difficult work of writing, in my opinion. Because that's when you're confronted, you're confronted with what you've actually got. Some of it just doesn't work, or you really need to work hard to make it work. And I think that is the stage at which you really begin to know your material best. It's like, you know, with all your best intentions, you go out and shoot something. But now, ultimately, you've been given, in some way, a formless clay. It has a certain color, it has a certain texture. But you're going to now mold it into that final, you know, figure that you want, you know. So it's the time at which I think it's the hardest and most exciting time. You're also adding music, you're doing so many things.
So is your writer involved in that process, like on the changes on the set or the changes finally in the edit, or when you rewrite the film in the edit on the table? So does the collaboration end where the writer has given you a script? Or like we had this discussion yesterday, when some directors prefer not to have writers on the set. Some directors want the writer to be on the set and, you know, be a part of the process. How does it work for you?
Sneha, of course, was involved. She was very happy. She came to set once, but she was happy to come, but she wasn't on set. I didn't, even on the edit, Sneha didn't come in. I mean, I'm always happy to have my writers there, but unless it has happened where I've felt like off camera I wanted something said or done, because I missed something on screen. For instance, in the scene where Bablu and Jaya, you know, Poonam leaves the room and says, "Ajeeb baatein karti rehti ho," and she leaves the thing and she looks at, Bablu is staring at her, the kid, and she says, "Kya dekh rahe ho, tagar tagar?" And at that point when he finally says, "Chappal pe kisi ka naam thodi na hota hai, तो किसी का भी चप्पल पहन लो." And the penny drops and she says, "Oh, I've got this tattoo, I forgot." At that point, there was obviously a shot of Bablu getting up and going out of the door, etc. But I wanted to stay on Jaya. So I needed that exit of Bablu to happen off camera, and I wanted to write in a line for Poonam to say. I mean, I wrote that line, but that's the kind of thing that I would have got, say, if it was a longer thing, I would have got Sneha to write, where she says, "School nahi jana hai kya?" He says, "Nahi." And she says, "Chal," and whatever. So that kind of thing would be something that I would get. And it's happened in the also that Sneha's had to write 1 or 2 lines later for the dub. So that's when kind of I get a writer in after we've okayed the script.
So I think we are now running out of time. One last question before we throw it open to the audience. So there are a lot of new writers and filmmakers sitting here. What would that one advice be, you know, if you had to give one for anyone or everyone to have like that career in the film writing business?
I mean, it's not something new, but I feel like as writers, we all need to dig deep into our own experiences. what we write is often the most honest if we use, things that are personal to us, things that we feel strongly about that affect us as members of society. So imagination is, of course, highly essential when you're writing, but nothing is more effective than using your own fears, your own joys to weave into your writing. So I would say, dig deep and be open to how writing changes you as you're writing. And be open to collaboration, because I think we are all part of an industry that is built entirely on that. If we don't work together and allow, work to make each other shine, the film will not. And so all criticism needs to be taken constructively, and and of course, but also commit it with your own voice.
Thank you. So we'll throw it open to the audience. Do you have questions? Can you give me the phone? Yeah. So there are three questions. The writer-director relationship is a very crucial one. How important it is for the film for the writer and director to be in unison at every given point. Can different perspectives help the film?
Different perspectives can definitely help the film, and we do this process where we also test our films. We often test the script as well. So we have a reading of the script with lots of people there. So you kind of get a sense of whether the script also is working well before you make the film. So perspectives, if you want to make a film that kind of can play to a wide audience, it's important to bring in as many, minds in the room to just listen to their perspectives. This is not to say that you have to take their opinions on everything, but it helps you as an artist tell, oh, okay, I was intending this to be funny, or I thought it would be scary, but people find it not, or whatever, that sort of thing. So, but as a writer and a director, I feel it's important to, because I'm both and I do write, is that I feel like as the writer, you have a certain image and idea in mind, and you have a certain rhythm and storytelling tone and pitch, which often the filmmaker may or may not have. You must ask Sneha whether she imagined the film like this. That would be an interesting thing to, or Biplab or Divyanidhi. Because according to me, all three of them would have had a different image when they were writing it. So, but you have to trust that both people are working towards the same destination, that you are planning to make a film, you both kind of agree that the film has this tonality or pitch. But your instincts could be different, and it's I think essential to let yourself to be open to the other person's perspective, to be convinced or to be allowed to be persuaded by somebody else's opinion, only to make what you're doing richer and more, kind of complete. At the same time, for a director, it's highly important to have your own tuning fork very alive, because ultimately, I think films are all about energy and pitch. It doesn't actually, sometimes the most ordinary, simple stories are the most compelling and hard-hitting because they have a certain energy about them. They have the director's instinct running through them. And I feel like for a director, it's even more important to sort of keep that in mind, because there's so many people whose ideas you're getting when you're making a film. So for a writer, it's usually only just the director or the producer. But for a director, it's your lead actors have a certain idea of how they want to play the character, and so many collaborators. So I think being alive to an instinct is really important.
While writing social comedies, how can a writer ensure that there is a balance between the comic element and sensitization for the subject?
I think, it's, like I said earlier, it's more essential to make sure that of course, when it's a comedy, you have to just literally make sure you get the laughs. You have to make sure that it's funny. That's the only takeaway for any comedy writer. But then are you getting the laugh at the expense of something else? Is it, are you making, so it can't be social commentary that you're, sort of hitting on someone's head. Often you do not have to say something, even say anything to make a statement, a social statement. I think those are the much more powerful things. So I would say for a comedy writer, just write for laughs, but you already know what you're critiquing through your comedy. So you would be sensitive to positioning or addressing those issues in the right way. For instance, one of the most incredible scenes in Sairat, not Sairat, sorry, what was his film before Sairat? Fandri is when the national anthem is playing and they are walking with the dead pig past it, and it's just incredible social commentary. You don't have to say anything, you don't have to write any, it's a moment that makes you, it kind of made me in some ways laugh at the genius of it. So I think even as a comedy writer, just give us laughs. Just make us enjoy what you're writing, or at least embed as much and get into detail. I feel like stuff in detail, stuff in as much as you can. Like try, once you've got the broad outer structure, layer. People pick up on everything. You do not need to say it. Layer it with a picture on the wall. Layer it with color. Layer it with anything. I mean, even when you're writing, it's important, I think, for screenwriters to think visually as well. So plot is plot, but how can you write in a way that there are visual layers for someone to pick up on what you want to say?
Oh, thank you. This has been very insightful. Thank you so much, Kiran.
Thank you.
And as always, you've been very wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you both for a wonderful masterclass. I'd like to invite screenwriter and senior SWA EC member Charudat Acharya to hand over a token of gratitude to our guests.